what is measured gets improved ultimately, and like that's been proven time and time again. And so in order for sales and marketing to stay closely aligned, I really strongly believe it comes back, it just ultimately has to tie down to the goals, and they have to be shared.
Thanks everyone for joining Soundcheck today. Rory here, co-founder and CEO of Trumpet. I am delighted to be joined by Alice from Cognism on this very important topic of the shift that we're seeing in collaboration between sales and marketing teams. But I'm going to do an introduction for you because I won't do a good enough job of it. So Alice, over to you.
Yeah, hi, really happy to be here. I'm Alice de Courcy, CMO at Cognism. At Cognism, we're a B2B contact data provider. Love talking about all things sales and marketing. So yeah, this is right up my street. Looking forward to getting started.
Sweet. So the first topic that I wanted to kick off with is how would you define the current state of collaboration between sales and marketing departments in most companies? Because I personally feel like there's been a shift. Traditionally, there was lots of lead gen. Now there's demand gen, and we're seeing an increase in collaboration. But yeah, how would you define it?
Yeah, and I think when I was sort of thinking about this question, it does really depend on the way the marketing org is being measured ultimately as to what you're going to find within an organization in terms of marketing and sales alignment. And also slightly what purpose marketing is viewed as within that organization. I think the two go really closely together. So if the marketing team is measured on MQLs, while sales are focused on revenue, you're for sure going to have a whole load of misalignment from the start. It basically means that, marketing can hit quota in a month, in a quarter, while sales are, not hitting their targets. And then that's when all of the finger pointing starts and the lack of collaboration and mass inefficiency. So I think that's like one state. But then, as you kind of alluded to, there is definitely this shift now and understanding that these sort of low intent MQLs, where we were running these lead generation plays as a marketing organization in order to generate, I guess, almost to hack the model. Like, give us something, give us a target, and we'll go out there and we'll get it, and we can probably do it really well. So I suppose marketing got really good at doing that when it came to MQLs, but then it became pretty apparent that actually when it comes to do these types of low intent leads actually generate business, like meaningful business for the organization, and keep us like closely aligned to sales, the answer is most definitely not. And then there's definitely been a shift from buyers as well, away from wanting to be like artificially pushed through a funnel just because they've downloaded a piece of content. They also don't really want to consume content in that way. So marketing have had to work out how to do things better, differently, which ultimately has led to more alignment with sales. So as an example, at Cognism, we used to run like a full-fledged lead generation play. I would say we were probably one of the best in the business at it. We could generate thousands and thousands of MQLs in a month, and we had a great playbook on the SDR side. But then recently we've shifted completely to demand gen first approach, where we're only focused on bringing in high intent demo requests, people who actually want to talk to our sales team about our product and service. And it's definitely led to like a far healthier relationship with our sales organization as a result. It means that my targets and destiny is closely aligned to that of the sales team. We end up collaborating and working on projects like much more effectively as well, just because of the necessity of it and the way that we're doing marketing today. So I'd say that shift is happening. I would say I still think there's a bit of an echo chamber around it, and it might feel like on LinkedIn that's happening everywhere. But I think I'd say it's still like the minority of companies that are doing that. And you'd probably still have a majority, and definitely larger enterprises still running that probably more traditional MQL lead generation play. And they probably do still suffer from the alignment that causes as well, misalignment that causes.
Definitely. I think we're seeing it in sales alone, the shift away from spray and pray. It's not just a numbers game anymore. It's all about quality. It's not about quantity. So it's interesting to hear that that's also been happening in marketing. And you mentioned there that buyers don't want to download gated content anymore. It's not how they want to learn about businesses. How do they want to learn about businesses?
Yeah, and every buyer is going to be is ultimately going to be different in how, or even every buyer, and then within that, every person within every sort of buyer ICP will probably be slightly different in how they want to engage with your content. So the main thing to be thinking about is like, how can I offer my content in an always on, friction-free motion that's easy to consume, in the channels that the majority of my ICP are engaging with. And that you've got to figure that out. And so that actually comes with it quite a lot of complexity, quite a lot more onus on the types of content, the variation of content that you need to produce in order to do that effectively. So, rather than a 50-page PDF ebook, we're talking about actually releasing something which might be in an online asset format, which has multiple short form videos, which can be hosted on YouTube, also on Spotify. We can create an audio version of that. You can be creating like smaller snippets for organic socials. You can also deliver that content through newsletter format. It's just having to really diversify the way in which that content is going to be, engaged and consumed with, and understanding that people are all different and want to and will engage with it in different ways. So you're only going to enhance your chances of success by kind of increasing the output and the types of ways in which you are producing that content. You can't just do a standard landing page form and then link through to a static PDF download anymore. It's not going to cut the mustard.
Yeah, those days are gone. But on that note, you've done a brilliant job of launching the blueprint. Do you want to share more information about where that idea originated from and how you've kind of thought about, I guess, distributing it and the format of it as well? Because I've been sharing it with everyone I speak to. I think it's brilliant. But I'd love to hear how that came about.
Yeah, so this whole idea of doing content in a different way, this is quite, I guess this probably might be going into way too much detail here, but doing content in a different way and trying to come up with engaging formats and sort of big rock items that we can distribute in multiple places and in multiple formats is great. But then you also need, on top of that, you need to have like a process by which you ideate and you deliver consistently high quality content. And so the blueprint is part of a wider project that we've been executing at Cognism to operationalize a process around how we deliver this kind of content consistently to our audience. And that's called this easy mode framework. If you're interested in understanding a bit more about that, then check out Todd, Klauser, and Abaid. They are like the founders of the Easy Mode framework, and we worked with them really closely to kind of get to grips with what that means. But essentially, we've worked to build and define a narrative that we want to talk to our audience about, so our sales audiences about. And then from that narrative, we come up with key topics or pillars that we want to speak about. And then from there is how we actually build out like larger content assets that then will get distilled into multiple formats across multiple platforms. And that way it keeps us, like, we do that one big piece of work and ideation. We do it once a year, but you could do it like twice yearly. And then from there, you kind of have not unlimited ideas, but you've done the big legwork when it comes to like what's next. Because I think a lot of times it can just become very ad hoc, very like off the cuff, and there's no predictability towards it. So the blueprint was firmly a part of like our narrative that we want to talk about, which is that the way in which buyers buy today has changed, and we've touched on that already. And we wanted to showcase like how that actually happens in reality, partly by looking at like the Cognism growth journey and the things that have led to our success as a sales organization. And we know that something that works really well from a content perspective is leaning heavily on subject matter experts and subject matter experts across other companies, and utilizing them within like a larger content asset is always super helpful from a distribution perspective. So that's really like how these larger assets come to life. And then in terms of the distribution of it, you just look at all of our main channels, so whether they be paid or organic, and we are trying to dissect it into as many different formats as possible. We're not trying to second guess how people want to consume it. We want to deliver it in as many ways as we possibly can. And then the way in which we're measuring success from that is how is it all getting engaged with, and how is it influencing revenue ultimately, which we're able to measure through a really great tool called Hockey Stack, which gives us a lot of insight into this sort of darker side of social, the darker side of this like content marketing. A lot of people kind of push back on not gating content because they think we will never be able to understand. Like, and traditionally, that blueprint, it's a massive content asset, would have stood behind a gated paywall so that people could say, we had 5,000 downloads of it. We obviously don't have that data to go and share, but what we do have is unique views of that asset, watches of the video. On the paid side, we can say impressions, and engagement with each of the ads, and how that's led or contributed to pipeline and revenue. So yeah, it's just a whole different way, I guess, of approaching something. I've got into loads of detail there, so maybe too much.
No, it's really interesting. I think for lots of people to hear, and I think you touched on an interesting topic there of leaning on third parties when it comes to content, whether they're customers, industry experts, or social proof as well. Because I've read an interesting stat from Gartner that buyers are 1.4 times more likely to interact and engage with content when it's someone that's outside of the company. So again, case studies and things like that. So it's interesting to see how you've kind of embraced that for the blueprint. And then once you've created something as comprehensive as the blueprint, how do you educate sales to start then using it in their journey as well? Like, is it something that they're currently doing, or and is that primarily on socials?
Yeah, and I think a big thing about that is, and it comes back to like with sales and with aligning yourself with sales, you need to, what's in it for them? Like, it's not super exciting for them when we say, oh, we've got this big launch, we're going to get tons of engagement, we think it's a great content asset, until they really understand like what's in it for them. So what we've done actually is we've been able to sort of showcase some of the journeys that our biggest deals and biggest pipeline accounts have come in through, and the number of touch points and the types of engagement and the number of contacts at those accounts that it takes in order for us to actually end up like winning that deal. And so what we do is we have these weekly calls with sales, and we'll sort of use that opportunity to, again, like drive home the fact that if you want to engage an account, we all know we need to multi-thread. We all need to know we need to have multiple contacts engaged within that account. And then we show the case to them, the types of assets that these accounts that are successfully converting are engaging with. And that will be things like the blueprint or previous big rocks that we've produced in the past. And that really, really, really drives home the value for them of like what's in it for us, for actually like using this in our outreach, or using this to help educate the market through their own LinkedIn organic, etc. And we find that just works so much better. It's like sort of dangling the carrot of, you want that big commission check. This is what others have. This is how we've actually managed to make that happen for others. And this is how you can kind of do the same and utilize all this work that we've been doing in order to help you like hit that goal.
Nice. It feels like collaboration between sales and marketing at Cognism is doing pretty well, and I feel like you've had a shift over the years from primarily lead gen to more demand gen, and that's across the whole business, and it's working brilliantly. So what would you say are like the common problems that surface when collaboration isn't happening between marketing and sales teams, when they're not on the same page?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously loads of things to unpack there, but I think ultimately what it comes down to is just inefficiency, and that's going to be inefficiency across a whole array of aspects on the go-to-market motion. So like ultimately, in order to ensure that sales and marketing are this efficient, tight-knit engine working towards the same goal, they need to share the same destiny. It's just how we as humans are sort of made to operate. Like if you give what is measured gets improved ultimately, and like that's been proven time and time again. And so in order for sales and marketing to stay closely aligned, I really strongly believe it comes back, it just ultimately has to tie down to the goals, and they have to be shared. So, and the other thing I would say that's really important, and we've always done both from the very start, like, I mean, I was Cognism when we were probably like 20 or 30 people, we were all in one office, was that we really both respect the other's I guess speciality, and like and the importance that that brings to the revenue organization. So we actually have a motto at in Cognism's marketing team, which is that we literally exist to make sales easy, and there's a lot that is unpacked into that, but that is our reason for being. And then on the sales side of the fence, the way in which they kind of showcase I guess the respect for the marketing organization is, from day one we've always been very clear that any leads that come from marketing that are inbound demo requests should be treated with a golden glove. They are like the absolute nirvana. And I think by having that lens, like working both ways, it means that we have like a shared mutual respect for each other. And also on top of that, our destinies are completely aligned. So no one's getting credit unless we're both being successful. Both of our problems are always shared. And so we'll always put our heads together on a way to tackle them. And that has just, whether we were being measured on lead, like whether we were running lead gen plays to drive revenue, or now whether we're now running demand gen play to drive revenue, that has always kept us aligned. So I think that's like probably the biggest thing.
Interesting. So it sounds like you've navigated this shift very well at Cognism. And it feels like the leads that you're now bringing in, the conversations you're having, are around more of a project rather than a conversation. And what I mean by that, it was a term we were introduced to recently, is in sales, it's easy to get happy ears and think just because someone likes the product, or they've replied to an email, there is an opportunity. But is there actually a project there? Are they looking to address a pain point? And with this shift that you've gone through, it feels like you're focusing on more high quality leads. High quality, therefore, meaning there's more chance of it being a project rather than just a conversation. Someone's just interested in checking it out. How do you go about getting those kinds of leads in, or those kinds of qualified leads in, rather than just the volume which was happening before?
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately like what we call it is low intent versus high intent. So in the old world where we were running lead generation plays, we would have a mixed bag of leads, which were both those people coming in requesting a demonstration of Cognism. Their expected behavior was that they wanted to have a sales call, they wanted to have a demo, they wanted to see how Cognism worked, and they had a need to buy. And then at the same time, we also had these other people who were just had interested in content and topics that we had been putting out there to educate the audience, but they probably had an absolutely zero intent to buy, no active project. They were just interested in the topic, say, of cold calling and how they could improve their cold calling for their organization. So when you have that mixed bag, you can see very clearly there's like the low intent and the high intent. And stuff becomes actually a lot easier and a lot clearer when you say, right, we don't want any low intent. All we're focused on is doubling down on our high intent. And then when you look at the numbers and you run the analytics as well, and you split the funnel in that way, you'll see that like the conversion rates are hugely different between the two across the funnel. One is super inefficient, one is like very, very efficient, like much short sales cycles, higher ACV, and just ultimately like far better for the business, much more like, and higher win rates and more likely to turn into revenue. And so you need far less of the high intent in order to bridge the gap that you were getting from the low intent, because you were probably ultimately generating very little revenue from them, even though you're having a lot of conversations. So understanding that and like the maths behind it is really important, firstly, because then that gives you like, I guess, the building blocks for what you need to go and achieve in order to bridge the gap that you're leaving behind from having these low intent leads filling the funnel. And now what we do, which is that we run all of our content, we basically split our content into 4 buckets, which is content, which is stuff that we talk about to our audience, which has a dotted line back into our product or service. So an example of a content topic that we might talk about is account-based marketing or intent data and how to optimize intent data within your sales and marketing motions. Then we have a thought leadership bucket. This is stuff which is just, we know of interest, it's timely, and it's things that will excite and engage our audience today. And then we have a product bucket. This is like the most underutilized bucket. And I think the thing that probably a lot of people who are stuck in that lead gen world, we were similar, like guilty of, we don't put enough focus on, is all of the product messaging, value proposition. Like how can this product actually like serve or service help your ICP in their day-to-day jobs and roles. And then we have a social proof bucket, which is all the good stuff we're talking about, which is kind of third-party validated, like why should I care, trust and believe in the stuff that you're saying. So all of these buckets we have, and we fill them with content, and they're all bespoke to our ICP, and we break that ICP down into segment as well. And they run always on, all the time, friction-free to everyone. And they run across multiple formats so that we can engage people in the ways they want to be engaged with, and on multiple platforms, so on the platforms that they want to engage on. And so that's how we are able to generate more of those high intent demo requests than we would have been able to previously, because before, all that ad spend that we now have on this ungated 4 bucket always on play was having to be driven into driving leads and downloads of like gated content assets. And now we've freed up all that spend to just continually be educating the market. And that's how we've managed to scale the number of like high intent demo requests at Cognism. There's a lot more to it, and I'll give a small plug for if people are really interested in how we actually like execute on that on a day-to-day basis. We've recently launched, which is another big rock, a demand gen course. It's free, completely, like go and access it as you like on the Cognism website, and it goes through all of this in like a lot more detail I'm probably going to be able to cover on this short podcast.
Awesome. I'll make sure to share that with the team. And this is pure curiosity. Like when you ideated on these strategies, because they're big bets, they're kind of bold moves. Were there any like people, companies, or anyone that you looked up to for inspiration or to learn from, or was this purely like looking intrinsically how we currently do things, and this is our decision and how we want to grow as a company?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and I talk about this a lot with my team. Like, no idea is any good unless it's executed. So there was a lot at the time. I mean, there is still now. There's a lot of talk about this whole like shift from lead gen to demand gen, and there are some evangelists out there like Refine Labs, for example, being like the first to kind of set the pathway of this is how you should be doing things today. Now, the problem with all of that was there was no playbook. Like Refine Labs are a marketing agency, so you can understand why they were driving home that narrative in order to generate new business for themselves, and then to actually like go and like work with these clients to help them execute that playbook. And we did work with them for a small period of time, but the most successful thing that we did was just to figure it out for ourselves. So we actually locked ourselves away in like a room for 3 days, and we listened to all of the theoretical evangelism that was out there, and just like tried to get our heads into the way of thinking of how to do things differently. And then we just applied like what we know about our audience and I guess our best bets in terms of how we were going to go about executing it. And then from there, we have just developed and matured the playbook every month, like every quarter, every year, because it's been about it's coming up to 2 years that we've kind of been executing this way. And we learn as we go, and we mature and develop the playbook as we go. But it's very much our own in-house built playbook. And again, it comes back to, I think people can listen to a lot of this stuff, podcasts and everything else that's out there. But unless you actually take that information, apply it to your business in a way that you're actually going to execute on, learn from, and then develop, then there's actually limited value in it. So that's how we approached it.
It's like a band locking themselves away in a studio to record their album.
Yeah, very similar.
The band of SaaS, love it. And when you were coming up with that playbook, was there any change in how you were collaborating, engaging, spending time with sales that was like purposeful?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was quite the interesting thing, because I was like, I've got this really good plan now, and now I just need to go and get all the buy-in from the execs and the stakeholders. And actually, getting the buy-in from sales is probably the easiest thing, because what I was saying to them was, I'm going to make life so much easier for you when it comes to managing your team, because it's difficult for a sales manager when you've got reps who are both doing some form of low intent marketing generated requests, some very high intent demo requests, and then also outbound. It can be difficult to understand why in a month they don't hit target. Much easier to measure someone who is just purely focused on outbound. And also, therefore, you can also point them in like the direction of the highest value accounts, the ones that are hardest to penetrate, that do need that human touch. So that was, and then I used data to kind of back this up in terms of the amount of time that they were losing, these reps doing the follow up on these content, low intent leads, and ultimately for what that was driving, which was limited revenue. They might be getting meetings, so we might actually be paying them out, but we're not actually generating revenue back into the business. So that conversation was actually fairly easy, and sales bought into it pretty quickly. And then I guess like one great thing that came out of it was that we had this dedicated role in the sales organization, because we said, look, we're saying we're not going to have the volume we had before, because we're talking like, we would have 6,000, 7,000 leads to get through in a month before, because it was a mixture of low and high intent. So we needed to round robin across the whole of this SDR organization. We're going to have like half that volume, but they're all going to be super high intent, and they need to have absolute laser focused. And they need to be followed up with like impeccably, because they are asking for a demonstration of Cognism. They're our highest intent needs. And so we carved out a role which we call marketing development rep at Cognism, which was solely focused on dealing with that kind of demand. And that again was like an absolute game changer because it increased our conversion rates on those inbounds. Like when you looked at inbounds that were being round robined across the team beforehand versus inbounds that are just being followed up on from a dedicated rep, we're talking like 2x increase in conversion rates now because we have focus. These reps are like also some of the best performing reps we put in those seats as well. And then that's a role that really ties marketing and sales again really closely together. Like I don't manage the manager of that MDR organization, but I have weekly calls with them. I am completely invested in them being happy, those reps being happy, the lead quality being good, or anything that we can learn in terms of process or process optimization to increase like conversion rates. And yeah, so that was another tactic that kind of brought us closer together when we made that shift as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. And then, sorry, the last question is, in your role as CMO, you probably bought a fair bit of software and you've been on the other side of this buying journey. Were any of these decisions inspired by great buying journeys that you've been on, or also equally poor buying journeys that you've been on?
I would say poor. I've not had a great buying journey. I'd say it's only probably ever been inspired by bad buying journeys. And I think just resonating with me that it's a terrible way to buy software and it's not a good experience and it's not how I'd want it to happen. And just thinking about all the things that I would have liked to have had happen in a journey that didn't happen to me. And then we're just always trying to like optimize and improve on that. And some things like we can get really far on, and some things we're slightly, I'd say we haven't managed to make as much progress on as we'd like. I think someone did some research the other day. It was really interesting. They went out and basically requested demos of like 20 different software providers, and they were measuring the time from demo request to like outreach from that organization. And think the average it ended up being was like somewhere between 24 and 48 hours, which is crazy to me. But yeah, it was this type of stuff which I was just like, there is a better way, and if we can improve on these types of things and this type of experience, then I think just alone that's a competitive advantage, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think we're definitely seeing that in the market and in your space. I think you guys are killing it, and hence we wanted to have this conversation, dig deeper onto what you guys have been doing at Cognism. But yeah, I guess last question to wrap things up. Are there any kind of like actionable tips, trips, or recommendations that you would give to anyone listening who feels that their teams are quite siloed, and like the starting point to bring them together? And I know you mentioned at the start, it depends what they're measured on and things like that. But beyond that, how would you sort of make a start on increasing that collaboration?
Yeah, I've got a few. One thing that we actually did at Cognism, which also helped us like really realize that there was a better way outside of lead gen, was we walked a day in their shoes. So they basically do like these cold calling blitzes sometimes in the office. And Dave, who heads up the SDR team, came over and was like, would you be up for marketing getting involved? And I was like, yeah, why not? We'll call some of these leads that we're sending your way and see what the response is like. And so for a day, like it didn't matter what role you had in the marketing org, you were cold calling, or you were calling these leads that we'd been passing on to sales. And it was really, really interesting exercise, and it gave us a lot of respect for the sales team, and made us really question and think about the tactics and the things that we were doing as well. And I think ultimately we probably garnered a bit more respect from the sales org for doing that too. And yeah, so I'd say that's like one thing you could do. And also just it helps anyway, just talking to your customers, listening to the way in which they speak, the sort of language they use. You can pick up a whole load of things that will really help you in your messaging. So I'd say doing that like on a regular basis has actually probably got a lot of value. And then the other thing is over communication. So we think of sales as actually our customer. Like I said, we go back to like our job is to make sales easy. So if sales is our customer, we need to know them really, really, really well. And yes, not to be confused with the fact that Cognism also sells to salespeople. This would be the case if we sold finance to CFOs. Sales within our organization would be our customer, and we would want to know them, how they speak, what are their pain points, how can we help them and get ahead of that before they start coming to us with requests. Because if you're ever on the back foot with sales and you just become an order taker, that's when you're in a really bad position. So think of them as your customer, get ahead of it, understand pain points, and start speaking their language. Also, like, communicate ahead of time what your plan is for hitting the number and for helping them. So we have these weekly calls with sales, but make sure that you're always framing things in like, what is in it for them? These are salespeople, they're money motivated. That's why they're in the roles in the job. Yeah, you can never say something too many times. And you also need to make sure you're saying it in a language that they're going to care about. And then I'd also say, like, a big thing that's been really key for us in terms of collaboration is taking on a joint project. This is much easier to do when your destinies and your goals are aligned, but even if they aren't, I'm sure you can still find ways in which to do that. So things like, for us, like, we've had this whole idea of directly routing the best sort of high quality, high intent inbounds that come into AEs. And what does that experience look like? What's the technology behind that? What's the process? Like, measuring the impact, rolling it out. That's been a great initiative for us to work on with our sales organization. And then also account-based marketing pilots. So that's another great thing to really get the two teams collaborating on and working together. So I think finding a project that you can collaborate with sales on, where you can really get that buy-in and showcase like the value that marketing can bring, or vice versa, is definitely another way to help bridge that gap.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of those insights. I've learned a ton. I've made a hell of a lot of notes, and I'm going to be sharing this with the team straight away because I think there's some stuff that we can go ahead and use. So I cannot wait to share this with the lot. But Alice, thank you again for joining us today. It was a pleasure. Hope you enjoyed being part of the Soundcheck.
Yeah, thank you.